So today, we're going to have a series of presentations and discussions about utopian dreaming more generally. And of course, here we are at UCSC, the site of so many utopian hopes more than 50 years ago. Jim Clifford, who was out in the audience, and some colleagues organized a wonderful exhibition, which I think is closed now, right? About the origins of UCSC, and of course there are all these photographs of these white guys in suits being driven around the Cowell Ranch and presumably being absolutely mesmerized by it. The alternative was over in the Almaden Valley, and I seem to recall the story that it was a hot, muggy day, and of course here it wasn't. So they were really captured by it, and as a result, and the city of Santa Cruz was really interested in getting the university, although I suspect it also regretted the decision for a while with all of the students and all of the things that were going on. So this is the 50th anniversary. There's this is a 50th anniversary event. There are various things that have been going on all year, and one of the inspirations, in addition to Utopia, for the conference was that 50th year anniversary and thinking back on the early utopian years of the campus. So what I wanted to find somebody who could speak to that. And of course there are all the usual suspects, but Barbara Lawrence, who has been around for a long time, proposed someone who had been involved in fairly early years of the campus. He was a student of Page Smith, who some of you know was one of the founding faculty members and then left. And I don't know the full story of that, but maybe our speaker will tell you about it. So our speaker is Fred McPherson, and I want to first note for those of you who might know that there are several Fred McPhersons running around Santa Cruz County. And our Fred McPherson is not those Fred McPhersons, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is since you've got the program and you've got his biography in there, I'm going to be fairly brief and let him take the floor. I think the important thing to note is that Fred, and again he probably will speak about it, left the university along with Page. And he was working on his PhD, and so instead he earned a PhD from Santa Cruz Paideia, and did work in particular on the San Lorenzo River and restoration of the San Lorenzo River. And he continues to teach, somehow I thought he would give a much more interesting presentation than one of our, sort of standard speakers. So I'm going to turn the floor over to him. We've titled it Utopia at UCSC, the early years, but, it's up to him to decide what he's going to say. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and have this opportunity to talk about this period in history. We're talking about 50 years ago for UCSC, which was founded in 1965. And when you can, 50 years gives you kind of the permission to go back and open the doors and say, what really happened back in the 60s? A lot of things about the 60s have been forgotten or deliberately hidden or misrepresented. A lot of things about, the Vietnam era and the psychedelics and that sort of thing people have not wanted to talk about. But that was the era in which UCSC was founded, in 1965. So I'm delighted and thankful that I had this chance to be here today, or that I do have this chance, and that I've had the chance to kind of personally go back and think about this period for me and what I was doing there and how my life fits in with this 50th anniversary of the founding of UCSC. So let me just say that in 1965, I wasn't here at UCSC or even in the area. I was out teaching biology and doing porpoise research out at the Naval Ordnance Test Station in China Lake. And I only moved up to this area in 19 '66. And I had the opportunity to get away from working in the environment of where they're testing all the napalm and that sort of thing, and to come to this area, to the Palo Alto area, to be a part of a school that grew out of the peace movement over in Palo Alto. It was called Pacific High School. I could tell a lot of stories about Pacific High School. It was actually a school that the students and the staff built. It's still there. Now it's a Zen Center up on Skyline Boulevard. It's about 2 miles south of where Highway 9 hits Skyline. Anyway, it was a school that we built, and it was a kind of exploratory, experimental high school where the curriculum was, you might say, individualized for each student, and they had a chance to explore topics by themselves and in groups. And one of the groups that came up, we had a lot of events up there. Sometimes we turned the school into a Zen center for a week, and another time we had the Black Panthers up there, and another time we had a group come up from Boulder Creek in the Santa Cruz area called the 25th Century Ensemble. And they came up and did this perfect music session. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And some great musicians came up, and they brought their space bass. And I said, that sounds like a great group to start playing music with, because they were down in Boulder Creek. And so I got involved with this group, and we would do a lot of, eventually we would do a lot of benefits around the area. And we would do benefits that would, for the peace movement. And then up here at UCSC, Alan Chadwick came to the campus in about 1966. And if you don't know who Alan Chadwick was, he was an organic gardener dedicated to the Rudolf Steiner School of Horticulture and the French intensive double digging system. And he came and started the garden up here near Stevens College and the Cowell College. And we were asked to come up and do some benefits up here for peace movement things on campus and some of the draft. Remember the days of the draft? There were anti-draft benefits, and then we did some benefits for the garden. And that was kind of my first contact with UCSC, about 1968. And I thought it was just wonderful. And I brought a couple of artifacts with me to share with you. Let me get them over here on the table. These are genuine artifacts from the early days at UCSC. One is in relation to this book that has recently been published by Holly Harmon. This book is titled Inside a Hippie Commune, and it deals with the life of this young girl, teenage girl, growing up in the San Lorenzo Valley, who did live in a hippie commune there, the Holiday Cabins in Ben Lomond. But also this book is a chronology of life in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It deals with, look at the beautiful pictures. It's well illustrated. You can see great stories. There's Suzuki Roshi up at Pacific High School, and there's stuff about many of the things that went on in that era. And so it also deals with what happened at the commune. And one of the things they did is they helped do these light shows. And they would come around to different places like the barn, and that's dealt with in here, UCSC, and a number of other places. And they would do light shows along with our local dentist, Dick Smith. And the light shows that went on up here at UCSC were incredible. And I'll put this down. I just wanted to describe those because that was my first contact with UCSC. And the stories you may hear about what went on there are maybe different than what I would like to say about them. UCSC, when it first started, was founded on the idea that there would be, it would be interdisciplinary. And at each of these new colleges that were started, they'd be small, kind of liberal arts kind of a college, and they would have people from different disciplines. And some of the people that are here in the audience today, I think, were part of that those days. And so what they would do every so often, maybe once a month, is they would have a festival of some sort. And these would be multi-dimensional, multimedia, interdisciplinary events that featured music, dance, the arts, technology of putting on a light show, which is quite involved, movies, slides, and a number of other things that go along with a slide, with a light show. And they would be held in the dining halls, like up at Cal College or Stevens when they were first built. And they would have a big screen on one side, and on that screen they would project some of the light show. Imagine this was the dining hall here. And you'd have the projectors up there, and there would be kind of a lot of things happening at once on the screen, and also on the walls all around. And you could put slides in there of the theme. When we did benefits for the garden, we put a lot of pictures of flowers and butterflies in the garden and people in the garden. And sometimes when we would do other ones, we would project movies. And a big movie we made was called Beachhead in Paradise, and that is now available along with Holly's book. The original movie is on this DVD. It was made by Max Hartstein, and it featured a big event at the Holiday Commune where they presented this first space base in inner space at this event. And if you want to see a little bit of what actually happened at that event and what was projected into the light show, this is a great DVD to look at. So that's one artifact I bring from that period. We would usually have some bands. Sometimes they were student bands and other bands that are also described in the book here. Some of the same bands that played at the barn also played here at UCSC. And then towards the end of the evening, and some of you Mike Walker's here, he might remember this, and Ralph, we would start with a moment of silence, and then oftentimes the thumb harps, people who had a thumb harp would play it. And I brought a thumb harp. This is a 69 model. You probably hear it from this microphone. So the thumb harps would start playing, and then sometimes we'd have 2 or 3 or more thumb harps playing. It would be like a choir of thumb harps. And then some of the drums would come in, and the idea was that whoever heard a note they wanted to play, they would just play it. This was called perfect music. And pretty soon, dancers would begin dancing, and the light show would be going on. And sometimes these songs would go on for hours. This one is made from recycled plywood we found somewhere, and these little metal prongs came from the street sweeper up there in Boulder Creek, and sometimes they'd lose them. So we had those recycled. You can play it standing up or can also play it sitting down like this. Between your legs and so it has a great versatility. So out of these wonderful events, some of the richest parts of the early days at UCSC came to me and came to the community, because when you get everybody together playing music, dancing, celebrating life, celebrating the things that people cared about, and studying to prepare these festivals and then doing them, it really brings people close together, and to me it characterized the early days at UCSC. The 25th Century Ensemble also started getting involved in playing these moon festivals all over the place. Aptos, Soquel up in the hills, you know, and usually we'd have a moon festival once a month. And so between playing all these festivals at the barn and doing light shows and moon festivals, we had a very active community. Now this might relate to what Ernest Callenbeck incorporated into his Utopian stories and his vision. It eventually, well, it sure affected the whole community, and these kind of events went on all up and down the Santa Cruz Mountains. Over in Palo Alto, Ken Kesey and his group were doing them all over the place, and then went up to San Francisco. And so this was kind of a lifestyle of the peninsula of the Santa Cruz Mountains, anyway. Now, so my main contact was there with these benefits, we called them, in the early days. But in 1969, I kind of left Pacific High School. I bought a house in Boulder Creek about 1967, 68, somewhere in there, and I'd started to live more over on this side of the hill and get involved in the music and things like that while I was still teaching at Pacific. But eventually, I found a job with UCSC Extension, and I got to teach some of the first classes about human ecology back in the fall of '69 and the spring of 1970. And then things were going good, and I was asked to be a program coordinator, and I could then start to coordinate classes about organic gardening throughout the UCSC Extension area, over in Palo Alto and Menlo Park and places like that, as well as here. And then in the spring of 1970, you may remember this, all this kind of utopian fun and excitement that came with coming to UCSC and the new college and kind of having these new opportunities. All this came at a time when the Vietnam War was intensifying, and the bombing that was not supposed to have been taking place in Laos and Cambodia, finally we found out it was taking place. And the horror of it, of killing that many people, became public. And there was tremendous protests, as some of you here, I'm sure, remember. And then from those protests, there was a backlash, a reaction. There were the killings of the students at Kent State when they shut down some of the facilities at Berkeley and here on this campus and Santa Barbara. There was a big reaction from the university, as you might imagine. And there's a lot of fear that this was going to get out of control, and this experiment that they'd started up here at UCSC was out of control. And so there was a backlash. And in that spring of 70, that was when the first Earth Day was scheduled all across America and maybe the world. And we'd planned, because we had this network of people who like to get together to play music and have festivals and benefits and so forth. We planned to celebrate Earth Day. One event was over at Cabrillo College. Mike Walker was coordinating that. One event was down on the Pacific Mall, and the other event was supposed to be up here at UCSC. And when we got to the event up here at UCSC, there was a band there, and we came in with our light show equipment and ready to play. But we had, there was 4 policemen there, and they were really concerned about what was going to happen. And people came in, saw the police, and they kind of turned away. And any money that we did collect, we had to give to pay their salaries for the night. So nobody, no band member, nobody got any money for that event at all. And when I went back to work the next Monday, the next week, my Dean Sharonson, he brought me in and said, "Fred, there's some things you can do at UCSC and there's some things you just can't do. And so we no longer need your services." And I was so heartbroken because I was just getting to do the classes I wanted and teach or coordinate the classes for organic gardening. And that same thing happened to other people after that Earth Day event. So Earth Day up here at UCSC was a kind of the epitome of a backlash to this protest of the 60s. I want to say that the characteristics of UCSC, I wrote a little list of what UCSC was, let me say this different, about the vision, the founding vision and goals were for UCSC. It was supposed to have been like a new innovative experiment, an alternative experiment in education, where we would have small colleges, kind of patterned after the liberal arts colleges, and they would be independent within the context of the whole UC system. So it's going to, UCSC was deliberately at the very beginning set out to be an alternative experiment. And so from that perspective, they wanted to permit the staff and the students to kind of have new rules and opportunities to learn, explore these goals in a different way. And they're hoping that this would be an example of new forms of education. The idea of this would then be the city on the hill that would show the way to other more innovative, interdisciplinary, multimedia kinds of exploration of learning and student involvement. The first colleges were, I think the first year, students started here in '65, there's only about 600. And even by 5 years later, there's only about 3,000. And as somebody mentioned earlier, now there's about 15,000. So things have changed quite a bit in that sense. So those are some of the characteristics of the earlier days at UCSD. There was of course, younger faculty and younger students, the first year students. And the other theme that was prevalent up here was you want to teach by example. You don't want to just talk the talk, you want to walk the walk. That was a common, really understood way of proceeding. And those were some of the characteristics. Also, there was a great concern about being good stewards of the environment and having sustainability here on the campus and developing the campus facilities in a respectful way in relation to the various aspects of the environment. The other innovative thing that just sort of happened was when Alan Chadwick showed up. He was not hired by the university, and there's a whole story about him coming that is quite intriguing, and Paul Lee writes about that in his book it's a memoir that Paul Lee wrote called A Garden of the Mind, and it was a tribute to Alan Chadwick. So I would say if you want to learn more about those days, you could read that book. And also Paul Lee wrote another book. I'm just getting to this, what happened after Earth Day. Well, a lot of things happened to faculty members. Some were denied tenure. And it's not really clear exactly why. Was it because of the protests? Was it because of their stance on the draft in Vietnam? Or was it because they did not publish enough? And because the rules of the UC system is that you are granted your tenure, let's say, and your advancement based on how much you publish. Well, some of the professors who were involved in all these other wonderful activities that I've tried to describe were not publishing as much. And so for various reasons, Paul Lee was not granted tenure. And then Paige Smith said, well, this is the quote that you always hear, if this place doesn't have a place for Paul Lee, then it doesn't have a place for Paige Smith. So they both left the university, along with some of the other faculty, and they moved down into town. And I'd say all that happened about 1974, about in there. Now, some people say, well, that was kind of the end of the golden days, the early days of UCSC, but I would like to say that once they went down into town, wonderful new things happened. So it was like a kind of a transformation. When they moved down to town, they started between Paige and Paul and others, they started the William James Foundation. And in that, or out of that, they started things like the William James Work Company, which was sort of like a little Santa Cruz CCC project. They started the Penny University, that still goes on today. They started Paideia University, which was a way of, Paige was really discontent about kind of what had happened to the PhD system on campus, where you get very abstracted with your academic work. And he supported this idea that if you're going to give a PhD, you should be a good scholar, but you should also do something for the community. That was going back to a Greek ideal from Athens or something, where you were granted recognition for your academic work if you did something useful with it and you did something for the community. And so that's where I got involved with Paige in the Paideia work, and that's where we started working on the restoration of the San Lorenzo River. Also, the Homeless Garden Project grew out of that movement off campus. The Art in the Prison project that still goes on grew from Eloise, Paige's wife, getting really involved in that project. And as I mentioned, a lot of things happened with the restoration of the lower San Lorenzo River, and that ultimately has resulted in the plan we do have in place now, and a lot of the improvements that have been made along the San Lorenzo River in the lower part. A lot of other things, kind of spin-offs, happened too. KUSP radio was started out of some of the same energy for those festivals that had been going on. And also, one little thing that happened to me when I was asked, not to return, my wife was pregnant at the time, and we'd been thinking about having, should we have the home birth or not, And at that time, there was the beginnings of the midwife movement here in Santa Cruz. At the Moon Festivals, there was a lot of women involved as well as men, playing music, dancing, sharing food. And when I got laid off, it became really attractive because we didn't have income. We would have a home birth. So we got involved in home birth movement. There were home births. Mike can tell you about this over where he lived, and we had a home birth. And out of that, the whole midwife movement in Santa Cruz kind of got energy and started becoming more active. And there's eventually a whole college of midwifery started. And so that was the beginning of the women's movement, at least from our perspective. So a lot of neat things happened. Of course, politically, there's a lot of struggles over the land use, energy, the green belt idea, the lighthouse field battles, and the battle over the atomic energy plant out of Devonport. All those things went on, but they went on in a way that I think was different because of that movement, that exodus of people from the campus in the community. So I could go on telling stories for quite a long time, but I just want to say that when we think about the early days of UCSC, I think not only of what happened up here on campus, but what happened to the whole community and to these what we call alternative lifestyle, alternative energy, alternative cultural movements throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I think that this is what Colin Beck picked up on and incorporated into his Utopian novels in various ways, not just what happened up here at UCSC, which was kind of like a utopia, but what happened in the whole community. And when we think about the future, I think what I see is that out of all this, it seems like we have a duality, but there's really the potential for reintegration of all the wonderful things that have gone on and are going on in the community with all the good things that have continued to happen up here at UCSC. And what I think is going to happen is we're going to have an unintended Utopia. Because of the challenges of global climate change, we have no other choice. If we're going to confront the real challenges that scientists tell us exist of not increasing the temperature more than another couple of degrees and bringing the carbon parts per million back down to around 350, we have to do that. In order to do that, we have to really implement huge technological lifestyle changes very, very fast. So I would say a lot of the things that were prophesized or prophetic in the Utopian novels will come to pass, because we have to do those soon, and we have to do them in a really massive way now. So that's my hope for the future, and it was a joy to be able to come up here and just to share a little bit about my memories of the past and my perspective. There are other people that have written, and like I mentioned, other books about it and stories about it. Oh, and I also want to mention that we do have a group that's been meeting for about the last 5 years or so, maybe longer. We're calling ourselves the Santa Cruz History Group. And there is a website. If you Google Santa Cruz Hip History, Ralph Abraham, you'll come to that website. And we're trying to put up a lot of stories on that website, pictures, things like that. You're welcome to contribute if you'd like. There's a way of doing that. Ralph's here today, and we're trying to collect stories, sort of like the one I told today, and about what happened and what happened to us individually, and maybe out of those stories and out of those pictures and movies and the work that Holly Harmon's doing in her book, we can get a better insight into those days, a truer insight. So thank you very much for this opportunity.